during my time when I was at Marineland in France as a supervisor, we had 7 orcas. So we had Kim, who is deceased. We had Sharkan and Freya, both are deceased. Val, who is now deceased. Shuka, who we sold while I was there. So I believe I worked and swam with her for a year, and we sold her during the 2nd year. And then we had Enoch, and then we had Wiki, who was actually born on my very first day of actual work in the park, even though I had been there since May. Absolutely, and we knew that there would be aggression, because in a situation like that, a whale is, you have to teach them right from wrong, and you have to show them what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. So just naturally speaking, the learning curve, you're going to have aggressions, because you're going to have whales that think things are fun, and you have to let them know that things are not acceptable. A great example of that is with Val. Val's actually the very first whale that I focused on in putting myself in the water with, and getting him to where he was stabilized out, so to speak, and then I would move on and focus on another whale. I think Shuka was the next one that I focused on, and then Freya, and then but all of the whales, we swam with all of them except for Kim. We never did water work with Kim, and that was because Lindsay, coming from SeaWorld of Florida, and her feelings because of Tillicum, and this is obviously before Don had been killed, but he had already killed 2 people before that, so she was very adamant about not doing anything on the water with Kim, even though I thought that we should. I thought that we should, at that time, do at least basic descents. But they were so scared of Val because he was getting to the age where he could be sexually mature. He was like right at that cusp of, he's about to go into that sexual, like his hormones are going to start coming up. So they were so worried about it. And I was not at all, because I came from SeaWorld of California, where at the time we were swimming with the only 2 sexually mature males in the entire world. So I believed that we could do it and do it safely. They, on the other hand, were very nervous, and they actually doped Val with heavy doses of medication that suppressed his testosterone levels, with the idea that, we would not have an incident from sexual aggression if we doped him so full of these drugs to suppress his testosterone. Now, the consequence of doping him with so much medication was that I would be in the water with Val, and I'm not kidding you or embellishing the story. There were literally times where, instead of being like right in front of me with his head down so his eyes are under the water, he would raise his head up out of the water so his eyes were above the water, and they would roll into the back of his head. He was that doped up on the drugs. So my argument to management is like, how can you argue to me that this is a safer plan? Which would you rather have? A whale that could become sexually aroused and we need to behaviorally work through that, or swim with an animal that's so doped up on drugs that we have no idea what's even going through his mind right now? We don't even know what he's thinking. So, and I eventually won that argument, and we took him off those drugs, and he then came back to a normal state of mind because he just wasn't there. All of them. I had many aggressions with Shuka in the water, also dry. She actually grabbed me and tried to pull me in from stage into a pool with 7 whales while I was on stage feeding her. Also had her in the water. I've had her drill me in the middle of the back and push me under the pool. I've had her come at me, shake mouth open. Val, I would say I never had an aggressive event with Val. I just had the incident with the socks with Val. Now, later I learned Val did start having aggressive situations with trainers, but that was after I was gone. Freya, that's well documented in my book. Freya was always considered the most dangerous waterwork whale. I had the most severe and unnerving aggression of my entire career with Freya. After that aggression, though, with her, she was like an angel with me, and we were so close, and we had such a great relationship. Even though she continued to still aggress upon Lindsay, the aggressions with Lindsay actually escalated. After Freya stopped aggressing upon me, they actually intensified and escalated with Lindsay, all the way up until the time where I left, and to the point where Lindsay even said to me when I left that she would never again swim with Freya, since I was not going to be there, because she did not have the safety structure to feel comfortable swimming with Freya. I saw Enoch aggress on a couple of times on a very new novel, a French trainer that we had put in the water. Wiki was too young. At that point, she was just a calf. So during my time there, I did not see aggression from Wiki, but as years have gone on, I'd be shocked if she did not. When I had with Freya that I documented in my book, where she pulled me under twice, and she actually pulled me under at my torso area, at my hips. That one was a very severe one, obviously, because she had ignored emergency recalls. Like I said, she had repeatedly pulled me under, and it was with open mouth. Now, I know later in 2008 or 2009, she had an aggression with a trainer named Greg there. That's on YouTube. It's still on. And what's so funny about this is Gianpaolo, before he was fired, he had said I had lied in my book. They had never had an aggression at Marineland. The first 2 years that I was there, I had approximately 10 waterwork aggressions, and Lindsay had 20 to 25 waterwork aggressions in the first 2 years alone. And not to mention, like I said, in 2008, 2009, which is still up on YouTube, so you can see it, Greg had an aggression with Freya where she repeatedly refused to let him get out of the pool, and he didn't handle it very well at all. He freaked out and panicked and tried to fight her, and you can't fight a killer whale. So instead of remaining calm and trying to work her through it behaviorally, he panicked and tried to get out, and she never would let him get out. Ultimately, she finally did, and they viewed that as severe enough as they completely stopped waterwork with Freya for good, and that was before Alexis Martinez and Don Branchaw were killed. But in that incident, Freya never even opened her mouth, nor did she pull him under the water. So my incident with Freya, she did open her mouth, and she pulled me under the water twice. Again, this was at the very beginning stages of waterwork and teaching waterwork with these whales. They had nothing. And, Freya, as you know, was captured from the wild. So here we are swimming with whales captured from the wild who had never had trainers in the water with them before. And Freya was the matriarch, and she was dominant. And, we always viewed her as the most aggressive, the most dangerous of all of the whales that we were swimming with. The ones I know for sure that I can recall, because, it has been a while since I have been at Marineland in France, but, all captive orcas, they have infections very regularly. It's very common for them to have infections, and a lot of times we do know the source of the infection, and a lot of times we don't. It'll show up as an elevated white blood cell count, and the vets will decide to put them on antibiotics. And, there are different types of antibiotics that treat different things better. And again, many times the vets don't know the source. They're guessing as well and saying, let's try this medication, and then you're taking more blood later to see if it's controlling the infection or if it's gotten worse. Most of the antibiotics that we give them, we stuff them in the fish. If the illness progresses and the whales really start to shut down, as we refer to it, as seeing their health really starts to deteriorate, there are more hardcore drugs such as dexamethasone, and we give that with an injection into the back by the dorsal fin, so we can beach the animals. Or if you're in a facility that does not have the ability to beach them, you can get them along the side of the pool and then stick this massive, it's just scary to even look at it, the size of this needle when it gets stuck in the middle of the orc's back by their dorsal. It's grotesque how thick and how long this needle is. And those are usually very last resort drugs. So once you see animals that are getting those types of injections, it's a very high probability that they're not going to make it. So my history has been when I usually see animals on dexamethasone, they die within a couple of weeks. The teeth are such an issue because they wear them down. They get these holes in their teeth. We have to drill them. So they get a lot of infections related to the teeth. So they're pumped full of a lot of antibiotics because of the teeth. At SeaWorld, and really with all captive orcas, ulcers are a huge problem because ulcers, just like with people, are a symptom of chronic stress. And there are medications that treat ulcers. One of the most common ones is Tagamet. And I believe that, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that's a medication that they use for people as well. Obviously, in orca, you're going off of their body weight, so they would get, if you got 2 pills, an orca might get, 70 pills. I'm just using those as hypothetical numbers, but you go off of the body weight. I've seen vets that go off body weight. I've seen vets that go off the actual amount of food that they eat rather than actually what they weigh. But yeah, Tagamet is a common drug to treat ulcers, which of course we believe is a result from chronic stress, which of course is from being in captivity. We were giving a lot of medications to the whales. We were giving them antibiotics. We were giving them drugs to suppress testosterone. We were giving drugs to prevent pregnancy. I mean, we were, there's drugs that treated ulcers. Yeah, we witnessed a lot of stereotypic behavior patterns, which is obviously a result from a bored animal. You see that a lot. It's very common with animals that are in captivity, not only orcas, but all animals that are in captivity. So whether they walk in a certain pattern and they just repeat that pattern obsessively throughout the day, which is heartbreaking when you see it at a zoo, something like that. The whales do it. They'll swim in the same direction, same pattern. Actually, some of the whales' dorsal fins, we know they collapse because they spend so much time at the surface of the water. And heat also plays a factor because when you have no shade structure and they're just baking in the sun at the surface of the water, their dorsal fin will also heat up, which makes it even more pliable and more susceptible to falling over. But also, depending on which way the whale chooses to obsessively swim in their circles, you'll see certain whales that their dorsal fin will actually, it will reflect their swimming pattern. So whether it's to the right or to the left, because they swim so much, so obsessively and repeatedly in that direction that as they turn, the force of the water makes the dorsal fin, start to curve and eventually completely collapse in that direction. What we call burping, and it is really like burping. I mean, it's I wouldn't even say it's close to it or similar to it. It really is that. It really sounds and has the same topography of a human being burping, and it's very common. If say you're in an environment and none of the whales did that burping type behavior, if you brought in an orca from another park and they burped like that, they teach it very quickly to the other orcas. So they pick up on that. And another one that's disgusting, and it's taught from one whale to another, is the obsessive regurgitation. And of course, that brings with it a host of health problems, because not only is it bad that they're regurgitating their food because they lose calories that way, so they're not getting their full base of food, but also the acid that comes up from their stomach, it's bad for the lining of the esophagus, and it also further destroys the already compromised teeth. The teeth that have already suffered destruction, it just causes more destruction as the acid from their stomach comes up during the regurgitation. So one of the most heartbreaking stereotypic behavior patterns that I saw ever with any killer whale that I've ever worked with was Sharkan at Marineland in France, who's now deceased. And, she was captured from the wild in 1990, so when I started working with her in 2001, she had only been in captivity for 11 years, and she was an adult. And she would isolate herself in a corner, and she would bob vertically up and down, and she would make this noise that I've never heard a killer whale make ever. And she would just make it all day long, and just sit there and vertically up and down, up and down, up and down in a corner of a pool. Now, how can anyone look at that and think that captivity is good for these animals?